All right, let's get this going. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We have such a great discussion on SaaS adoption trends for your customers, as well as getting to understand the importance of leading your customers through that SaaS journey. I'm so glad to welcome Jay McBain, our Chief Analyst from Canalys, a longtime pal of mine. Hello, Jay. Thank you so much for joining us. Going to share some amazing stuff with us. And of course, our Chief Revenue Officer, Stephen Thomas. Thank you, Stephen. We're so glad to have you. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Jay. Take it away, Jay.
Yeah, so I want to start, and if you've heard me speak before, I always start with numbers, and then I kind of go into stories after that. But looking at our industry that we're in, looking at opportunities that we have, there are plenty. You hear events every day talking about AI and all the different things that are going on. We got to think about our own businesses. We got to think about where we can grow our businesses solidly in double digits. Some partners are growing by triple digits, how we grow more profitably. So it's a big pie. It's businesses and governments spend close to $5 trillion around the world. You see hardware and software up in the upper right, but for every dollar of hardware and software, as partners, we make $2. And that growth in services is faster than the hardware and software category. So we're actually growing faster than the vendors we work with. And we have to start looking at the opportunities. And the first thing that I always do is obviously look by growth. And something that for managed service providers, a lot of VARs, solution providers of all types, have somewhat either ignored or haven't figured out for 25 years now is on the SaaS side, the cloud application software side. This is an industry that continues to grow at 20 to 30%, quarter in, quarter out, year over year. And looking forward over the next 2, 3, 4 years, as far as our sites are out there, same thing. It's growing at that same pace. So this year I'll hit $278 billion. And we'll talk later on about how every one of these dollars kicks out close to $6 in services opportunities. And so, we're talking about $1 trillion in services opportunity, and we're looking for ways how to break into this conversation. Because one thing is different about cloud application software than it is for PCs or servers or routers or switches or even legacy software, is that 75% of it today is purchased by line of business leaders. So the head of marketing, the head of sales, the head of operations and finance and HR, and the 12 vice presidents of every company have very particular business needs, and they lead the purchasing in these categories. So 75% of this number today is bought through the lines of business. And so if I just pick on one of those lines of business, I'll pick on marketing, just because a couple of weeks ago, the new MarTech stack came out. And there's 14,106 logos on this one slide. And you'll have to really zoom in a long, long way to try to figure out who these logos are. There's not even names anymore. It's just the little badges they have as apps. But suffice it to say, you can see the dozens of categories. You can see all the different players trying to get in front of this marketing buyer. So CMOs in many companies spend more money on in technology than the CIO. So marketing spends more in the technology space, but in a lot of cases, managed service providers and VARs and others are not in the room. It's not purchased through them. It's kind of what we used to call shadow IT or rogue IT. But over the course of time, if I look back even 15 years, you can see the growth of just this MarTech stack. At 14,000, last year was 11,000. You can go backwards and see how it's rapidly growing. That's 41% growth year in, year out, going back to 2011. I could say the same for the sales tech stack, which is about 5,000 logos. I could say the same for the HR stack, for the CX stack, for the operational stacks. There are 250,000 pieces of SaaS out there today and companies that support that. Even in the channel where I live, there's 233 pieces that if you look closely over my shoulder, you can see that tech stack. So again, one of the differences is that our industry, if you look at the $5 trillion, again, hardware, software, services, 73.2% of it goes to, through, and with partners. It's a really large number. We're involved in almost everything. If you take the broader number of what partner assisted, things that we're working on that may not even go through us, it's closer to 90+%. For example, Microsoft will report 96% of their business as the biggest company in the world by value is partner assisted. But in SaaS, only about 20% of it goes to, through, or with the traditional channel. So this is why, and this is what represents today one of the biggest opportunities. It's larger than generative AI. It's larger than some of the other things that we may be being sold through magazines and events and today, in terms of where you can jump in and grab perhaps triple-digit growth with the clients you already have by calling on these new buyers and figuring out ways to sell them different things and manage different things beyond the scope of the core contracts you have today. But it keeps you where you are. You're not becoming a digital agency, for example, that are going to help them with creative work and to do email campaigns and get them on the front page of SEO, Google, get websites built. Like, we're not talking about those type of services. We're talking about services today, everyday services, backup that we already do across the organization. We're talking about security that we already do across the organization. This just gives us an opportunity to go expand the conversation into these new buyers. So for example, managed services, now over $500 billion, and we have over 335,000 companies that have at least one managed contract. It's a perfect intersection with what we're talking about today in terms of expanding that SaaS level of services that we offer. Now, when we intersect with security, here's another industry. Managed services is growing at about 12%. This industry is growing by double digits as well, another $250 billion. But as you can see at the top, you can see $87 billion in terms of what software and hardware is sold into cybersecurity. But for every one of those dollars at the bottom, there's $2 of services. If you just look at managed services, there's 1-to-1. For every dollar of cybersecurity, there's $1 of managed services. But when you add in consulting, integration, and all the support around it, there's a really large opportunity in SaaS. So the triple intersection we're talking about, the managed services, the security, and now this entire $278 billion SaaS world, they're really, really big numbers, and it's in our customers today. So when we ask partners, given the tough environment we're in, obviously inflation, interest rates, global conflict, we have half the world going to elections this year. I mean, so many things are producing headwinds. We're one of the only industries that have double-digit growth opportunities in managed services, in security, in SaaS. These are pretty large opportunities to the point where 2/3 of you, all the partners, think that you're growing by double digits, think that you're growing strongly in these markets. You also think you're doing it more profitably than you did last year. We're always on the hunt of new opportunities and abilities to add to our portfolio, add to our skills, add to the services we offer our clients, our current clients and future clients, continue to delight them and take a broader view of their environment. So there's kind of two things that are sticking out right now as we're approaching kind of midway through 2024 that we should all be aware of and take an action on. One is that by the end of the year, the majority buyer across the entire $5 trillion in hardware, software, and services will be a millennial born after 1982. This is the first major demographic shift that we've had really in 40 years. This is a major shift in psychology, behavior. It's a major shift in how the customer journey works. The interesting thing in the SaaS market, this buyer has been around for a while. In that MarTech stack I talked about, in the sales tech stack, this millennial buyer has been the majority now for a few years, both in budget and quantity. So we know quite a bit about them. One is they're digital first, and in some cases digital only. There was a recent survey that said 75% of them don't want to talk to a human. So this could be buying $1 million worth of software. This could be buying a car in their personal life. They want to go through all 28 moments in a considered purchase digitally. And they're very subscription consumption friendly, growing up with Netflix, growing up with Spotify, okay about buying a toothbrush for $1 a month for the rest of their lives. This is a cohort that is SaaS friendly. This is why SaaS is growing so large. And for the next generation, this is early stage millennial, but we're talking for the next 10 or 20 years, it's going to be a very SaaS as a service friendly environment. The one thing that's changed in a major way is their decision criteria. If we look back on other buyers and legacy, how people wrote RFPs, things like price are important, service support, your brand reputation, all these things may be important, but the number one most important thing today is integrations. So I'll buy a product that's 80% as good as the next product if it works better in my environment. In consumer, for example, Apple talked about 79% of people won't buy a car unless it has Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. They neglected to mention, but this is kind of behavior that says that integrations are the most important thing when we buy software. Today's SaaS environment, as well as infrastructure as a service with the hyperscalers, the average stack size today is 7 layers. So they don't just buy marketing software to run everything. They might start with Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot, HubSpot type of solution. And then on average, they're going to add 6 pieces of software to it. So it isn't just backing up one piece of SaaS. It's the entire environment of creating a data lake, creating something that's friendly to, for example, generative AI, and having a strategy around protecting that data and protecting and securing that data around their environment. Another thing about this buyer is the single throat to choke, or that trusted advisor that we knew about baby boomers or Gen X, has gone away. These buyers understand that partnering is a team sport. They might have somebody, and this is not 7 partners that are all the same. This is not 7 MSPs that are competing with each other on the team. Everyone has their own position. Everyone, does their own job, but it could be a digital agency in the room of that marketing buyer. It could be a VAR, an MSP. It could be an integrator, system integrator. It could be a couple of ISVs. So there's a room full of perhaps 7 people. So to work in these SaaS environments, you're going to be working as a team. Next time you go to a customer and sign into the guest book, if they allow you to, look backwards. Accountants, 81% of them are tech services companies. Digital agencies, 78% of them are tech services companies. If you look backwards on the guest book, 80% of the people signing in to see your client are likely talking about tech. And you should be part of that. You should know who these people are and get yourself into the conversations to have some of these more IT-related conversations to add to the value. This buyer is also very marketplace friendly. The second biggest trend we're watching is kind of a changing language out there of partnering. There's a new economics of partnering. There's a new language. A lot of things are changing at once in terms of what used to be the model of, point of sale, where whoever collected the customer's money is who made all the margins, who kind of centered around that single trusted advisor at the customer. Well, there's value to be added throughout the entire journey. All 7 partners around that buyer are adding value in different ways. So the ability to measure, monitor, manage, all of that is changing as well. But as we know as partners, there's different skills that we can bring to the table. And so if it happens to be the particular buyer, if we're facing off against a CMO, if we're facing off against a head of CX or a CRO or an HR leader, a legal leader, we're sitting in front of a CFO, they have long-term trusted relationships that they might have built over 30 or 40 years in their career. And it could be an accountant, it could be a digital agency, it could be a legal partnership that they have that understands them as a buyer first. So that may not be your role. There might be an industry-based player. So depending which of the 27 industries they're in, or 297 industries, sub-industries that they play in, there could be experts that around compliance, regulatory, governance, also country level. There could be specifics around their industry and regulatory and how it works in their state, province, country, for example. So geographic, type of expertise. Segment, obviously a 50-person company is different than a 500, different than a 5,000. Different if you go into government or health or education. So sector expertise. We usually come in at the product expertise level. We know how to do security. We know how to do backup. We know how to do patching, edge, hybrid, and cloud. And then business models. There's all kinds of, from managed services to project-based services to subscription and consumption, all kinds of models that we're mashing together. So the average customer might choose, there's 7 people they trust among all of these lines, and that gets into a pretty large cohort.
Hey, Jay, just talking about that, you were talking about the different types of partners that are going to be in those environments, right in your customer shop. For the MSPs on the line here, how do you break into those relationships? Is it I'm looking up my local HubSpot integrator or et cetera? Kind of any examples or best practices there?
Yeah, it's really all of the above. It's when you look locally and you start to look at many of your clients, you start to understand that some of these professional services firms, and I've got a picture of them here on the right. In the SaaS world, I would get obsessed over the right side of this Venn diagram. Depending on the industry and the buyer type, there's a strong chance that they're surrounded by professional services firms that do other things, but have grown trust over time. Like I said, there's an 80% chance that everybody on the right is now starting to talk tech services. So that accountant, CPA firm that's done your accounting, your taxation, your audit work is more likely in talking about, a NetSuite, a Sage, in talking about Microsoft Dynamics, they're in talking about QuickBooks. There's an opportunity for them to grow their revenue and profit in SaaS, which is more than the commoditized accounting work they do, which is kind of stuck from a pricing perspective.
And I think it's interesting, just as you're talking through that, you think about the Sage and some of the integration work to be done. These are pretty business critical applications that without, right, the company's not operating. And this is something, as I've talked to the MSPs that we engage with daily, they want to find a path into those areas. And that's, again, I think for the group here, this is really going to be foundational to what both Jay and myself talk about, is you beginning to build those partner relationships locally to allow you to kind of cross-pollinate your cohort of customers with that, integrator that may be doing a HubSpot or a Sage, et cetera. Or again, giving you the opportunity maybe to white label some of those services on your own. So just again, Jay, just some tidbits there as I've talked with partners as well.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you look at your local chamber of commerce a little bit differently. So as you're making these relationships locally, and there's a strong chance you'll be a team. But if I look at some of the logos behind you, Stephen, Salesforce currently has 222,000 partners. They're not, legacy VARs or MSPs, because Salesforce sells directly, $35 billion direct. So a ServiceNow will have 250,000 partners this year. So your chances of 1 + 1 = 3 go up significantly. So want to talk a little bit about the opportunity. So if you have 7 players at the table and they're trying to sell services to the customer, those services come before, during, and after the transaction. And if you're a managed service provider, it's every 30 days forever. But those selling consulting services, design, architecture, those selling implementation, integration, there's hundreds of services that share among the 7. And this is the point about the multiplier. For every dollar of SaaS, there is a multiplier effect of what the customer will spend to get it to work. So some companies have actually got to the point where they write reports, Canalys writes many of these reports that break down how much these services are. But, for example, a Salesforce, a Mark Benioff kicks off Dreamforce every year with the multiplier number. And this year it's $6.19. And there's almost no customers in the world that are going to outsource 100% of the implementation and things like that. But let it be known that today it's about 2x going to 3x. And over time, over the next 3 to 5 years, it might go to 4x. what the likely outsourcing number on Salesforce will be. So a HubSpot, which you mentioned, is $5.80. So when you're sitting around a group of 7 and you're looking at all of these services before, during, and after the transaction, this is the opportunity to make $2 or $3 for every dollar of SaaS that's sold into the customer. And this is where SaaSAssure comes in. It's how do I sell backup? How do I sell security? How do I wrap this in something that's going to delight the customer and take advantage of this very rich multiplier in SaaS? We're not asking anyone to go start reselling SaaS, which might not even be available, but might come at low margin. We're talking about getting into the services that you already deliver, getting and expanding your current wallet share in that client, and protecting them, and doing things that perhaps they're weak on, and then perhaps exposed on over the last 10 to 15 years, that maybe the shadow or rogue IT that this came in on hasn't gone through that kind of federated or federal government level protection. So this is the multiplier effect, which is kind of taken over, and it's been the core of that SaaS argument. And why do these big SaaS companies have hundreds of thousands of partners when there's no resell opportunity, really? Well, they're making bank on the multiplier. And all we're asking, for the core audience of managed service providers and VARs, solution providers, is to look at that opportunity. In many cases, it's wide open. In many cases, it's not even competitive, among the other partners that might be around the table. And it's something the customer probably recognizes they need. And you can add a lot of value starting day one, but in most cases, 75% of cases, it involves going to meet the other people at your client. Move outside of IT and start moving into those lines of business, have these conversations, look at the stack they have, and really get into these core conversations about data protection, about that kind of future of security, and that the entire company's IP sits out in these SaaS tools, all of their customer data, all of their financial data, all their employee data. This is highly, highly critical, kind of go out of business type of stuff. If it's not available, we've got breaches, for example, up 94% in the first part of this year over last year. Last year was up 68% before the year before. This is almost doubling every single year. It's a question of when, not a question of if at this point. And most SaaS leaders, if you go to their conferences and go into their peer groups, are having these security conversations now. They're having the backup conversations and data resiliency conversations. You should be the one leading those conversations. Stephen?
Jay, coming off of that, is that share of wallet, right, in your engagement in that customer. If you're not participating, to your point, if you're not looking at the sign-in log saying who else is here and why am I not engaged with them, then frankly, you're just creating risk for yourself inside of that customer.
Yep.
Okay, guys. Jay, thank you so much. Stephen, over to you.
All right, everybody. So a happy day. And Jay, obviously, thank you for dropping some knowledge on us here early, giving us kind of the kickstart we need to think about SaaS as we think about data. And just for all of you listening in here, a couple of takeaways that I wrote down. This is really about helping you as the managed service provider break in to that new opportunity that Jay was highlighting for you, right? So go back to that $5.80 of services with every HubSpot dollar spent. We want to help as part of this conversation. We want you thinking or challenging yourself. How are you going to go build that business? A little bit of the storyboard here, the sales tech stack that Jay mentioned with 5,000 logos. I'm a CRO here at SaaSAssure, and one of the things that we do frequently is we start leveraging new technology that becomes critical to our process, that becomes critical to how we engage our customers. And again, if you're not having that live conversation, this is really what we want you to be thinking about and talking about with your customers as we go forward. So let's jump on in. This is one of those easy button conversation starters for you to get thinking about, again, jumping in and how do you operate with your customers. 85% of all business software is going to be SaaS by 2025. Even if it's 80%, even if it's 75%, the migration has started. Whether you're working with law firms, healthcare, you've got new EHR platforms, you've got new HR platforms, things like Bamboo HR and others. These are the things that you need to be paying attention to and make sure that you're engaging your customers in or around. Now, this one is one that we enjoy talking about. It kind of takes Jay's 14,000 MarTech slide and kind of diminishes it down to a smaller subgroup here. If you think about the average kind of mid-market organization, so in this case, think 250, 500 seats, you've got about 137 SaaS apps that are in that environment today, with each employee typically working with 9 SaaS applications. And that's particularly acute in smaller organizations, where you have people, as Jay talked about it, whether you want to call it shadow IT, but going and buying solutions off of their credit card and integrating those into what are business critical data and workflows. So again, just something to pay attention to. And you see the segmentation over here. A lot of this is still productivity and collaboration. So Microsoft 365 workspace, you've got the marketing component, but also that customer service component where you're seeing more active use of tools like Teams, Slack, and other chatbots to really engage with customers in real time. And one of the questions I'd love to pose is, and I'd be interested if you guys want to chat in, how many applications did you adopt that were new during that COVID period? What did you take that was traditionally an on-premise application that just frankly wasn't of use for that remote environment that suddenly you're now operating? So be curious to hear from you. So, drop an answer in for us. Now we're talking about SaaSAssure today, and a lot of that is driven around some of those internal and external threats to SaaS data. And so this is just ESG ran an analysis for us around what those root causes were with regards to SaaS data. This is pretty simple stuff. Service outages, unavailability. But the things that I want you to pay attention to here are the things that are really easily communicated to your customers. And that's things like accidental deletion, malicious deletion by an employee, misconfiguration. When I think about the impact that I can have to, say, our own instance of HubSpot or Salesforce.com, is I may get excited about an integration. And then suddenly, why is everybody's first name Pat in the CRM? Right? And where did that known good data go? How do I recover that data? How do I communicate that there was a problem? When do I identify that? Again, this is where pretty simple problems can compound themselves at scale with regards to SaaS in the collection of that business critical data in a couple of simple platforms. And you see that with some of your biggest platforms out there. Jay mentioned earlier, Salesforce.com. Salesforce.com doesn't have a native data protection platform. Again, terms of service, you're responsible for the data, they're responsible for the platform. GitHub, again, a great example if you're dealing with any cloud-first companies, so those millennials that buy cloud-first technologies, their companies are cloud-first. Again, a great example of data leak and data breach. And then SharePoint. And I would also highlight kind of the broader breaches, items like when the Okta breach happened. And so you had credential theft and risk at scale. Again, if you get access to that credentialing and you can get into some of those core foundational SaaS applications, that's a huge risk to your customers. And you, as the MSP who's probably delivering security and data protection for that customer, needs to engage that customer in a conversation around data protection and data backup for those solutions. How are you protecting that business critical data? This is a quick one, and I think this is just a good reference point for many of you out there who are wondering, great, what are the terms of service that have risk? If you go out to SaaSassure.com, you'll find all of the core or the majority of the SaaS applications that we support, which are many of the top SaaS applications in the market, and their associated terms of service. And this is something that you can use as a resource to communicate to your customers why it's important that you protect that data, why that data is at risk. So again, take advantage of the resource. It's a simple way to engage, again, in an important conversation with your customers. So why do we think this is an opportunity? And you heard Jay talking about this being part of that next step in the MSP journey. And this is really about you taking that next step, identifying what those next opportunities are. And with SaaSAssure, what we really see here is a simplified approach to expanding your ARPU with your existing set of customers. So we're not asking you to go out and create 50 new customers or sell a drastically new widget that you've got to go teach all of your sellers about. This is an expansion of the work that you do today in the data protection realm for your customers. It's a simple approach. Any level 1 tech can implement the platform inside of a customer or can operate the platform. It's that easy to use. But it's really, again, it's about you going and having a simple conversation, expanding that or reducing that threat risk and expanding that cyber resiliency for your customers. You go back and you look at the Change Healthcare challenges. A lot of that story around Change Healthcare was about a lack of cyber resiliency. So you go to kind of NIST model, it's that respond and recover. And that's part of the journey that you're going to close here with these SaaS applications for your customers. And the other piece that we really think strongly about, and I think, Jay again alluded to this, but is that leading the way. So how do you differentiate in what is a very noisy environment in the managed service provider space? A lot of that messaging, I was out at RSA, a couple of weeks back, and if you took the logo off, everybody looks and smells the same. And so how do you as a managed service provider differentiate the story that you're communicating to your customer? Frankly, you can use a platform like SaaSAssure to get into customers that you may not have presence in, that may have traditional data protection done by a legacy provider, a Commvault or a Veeam. And you go in and you tell the story around what are you doing for that SaaS data protection conversation. And that's where we see the excitement from our managed services partners around the offering. And finally, just reducing churn. Just on the phone with a large email security provider earlier today. And when we talk about churn, it's the stickiness of data protection that makes, again, a platform like SaaSAssure so valuable. And so we wanted to paint here a quick picture of what could be an example SaaS data protection journey. And if we were to look over to the left, and we were in a mall map right now, it would say you're here, right? Everyone is delivering that Microsoft 365 protection. But the you're here means that you've got 2 steps to go. And that is that next step is think about all of these applications Intuit, Bamboo HR, HubSpot, Dropbox, DocuSign. All of those applications are likely in use in the majority of your customers. You saw that Dropbox had a breach, I want to say earlier this month. You've got a number of providers here that have had challenges or risks. You've had QuickBooks make the move from what was traditionally on-premise offering to an online offering. Again, how do you continue to make that data protection story work for your customers and expand your own opportunity at the same time? And then that third part of the journey is really that specific, again, go back to the millennial and those cloud-first shops. Mark Andreessen said software will eat the world. At this point, every company is a technology company. And so every company, a lot of organizations are doing specific development work themselves. They're using tools like Jira. They're using tools like GitHub and Bitbucket. And again, go back, same storyboard there from a terms of service perspective. They aren't protecting the data, that critical data, those code repositories that you're putting into the platform. So that's what we're wanting you to pay attention to and hopefully be able to communicate out to your customers that risk exists. So let's talk a little bit for a second about SaaSAssure. So really simply, it's one platform to protect what is a very diverse SaaS footprint. I'm not going to read this to you. It's simple. It's very easy to use. We give you flexible storage options. And it's, again, this is something any level 1 tech can get deployed in an environment very quickly. But we're excited to be launching the platform. Officially, the platform will launch on June 3rd, but you'll be able to go out We're going to give you a QR code here at the end of this presentation where you can get 6 months and 50 seats free. So we hope that you're going to take advantage of that and participate with us as you work the platform. But again, core themes here, right? SaaS data protection, designed to be secure, and really easy setup and functionality. So how does it work? I call it unlimited scalability, because what we do is we provide data protection for that core set of SaaS applications. We have an API that basically takes that data out of those platforms, puts it into what is an S3 bucket. In this case, we call that our SaaSAssure cloud offering, and that's a very simple AWS backend. You can put that on any S3 compliant storage. So not a complex storyboard there. So you can bring your own storage if you'd like, if you've got data sovereignty issues, or if you just simply want data control. And we see that from a lot of our partners and customers that have deployed the platform during our beta period, is they do want that control over the platform if one of those core offerings were to not be available, or accidental account closure. Architected for security, we understand the criticality of the data that's going into our platform. We understand the criticality of things like CRM data and how you're doing your billing through those platforms. Again, you as the MSP are probably using a ConnectWise or a Kaseya to do your billing, but remember that your customers are using a HubSpot, they're using a QuickBooks, they're using a Sage to do their billing. That's where their critical data lives, and that's where you've got to go do that work. So again, making sure that you've got confidence around the fact that we're delivering a securely architected platform is critical to that. And again, that's what we want to share with you here. All right, so let's talk about some of those applications we think you can go have a conversation with your customers around. There's service management applications from a Zendesk to a ServiceNow, but really the meat of the story is Microsoft 365, as we talked about earlier. We're giving you a platform opportunity here to go have a conversation. You've got other platforms, Box, Dropbox, things like DocuSign, again, Bamboo HR, all of these different capabilities, Jira, and as Janine would like me to say, Confluence, not Confluence, it's Confluence, I know. But again, these are all applications that are often in daily use by your customers. And we'll give you a little Kickstarter with regards to how to engage your customer in the conversation. And one of those things, and Jay highlighted this earlier, but is a little bit a day in the life. So if you go back to the day in the life of Janine or a day in the life of Steven, sit down and have a conversation with the head of marketing at one of your customers or the head of sales. Do some discovery around what are those secondary applications that they're using. The explosion of tools like Clary, of Salesforce, you could go to the video recording tools that are in play now, things like Fathom, Fireflies. Like you have a bunch of kind of classical, what we would call shadow IT tools in the market today that you've got to be aware of, both from a data confidence or a data compromise perspective. So if suddenly you have a sales rep taking critical data on customers and putting that into a non-secured application, worst case is you get to have a security conversation with your customer about how they're managing SaaS application sprawl and how they're managing things like simply onboarding and offboarding. Again, we want you to start that conversation on those secondary SaaS applications in the environment. All right, let's talk a little bit about kind of the concept of SaaS management as a whole. And one of the things that I've discovered as I've been out there in the marketplace talking with our partners is a lot of our partners are still just trying to understand how do we do the discovery component of these SaaS applications. And we've partnered up with the Auvik team, and Auvik has a platform called Auvik SaaS Management. That's a really simplified tool that helps you visualize what SaaS applications your customers have. And if you're doing anything like security posture management, if you're doing any governance for your customers, then you're already or should already be having conversations around SaaS management. And what we want you to do is take that one step forward to data protection. And just as you've got core controls in SOC 2, NIST, FIPIDA, et cetera, that talk about business continuity, go back. does your customer have the resiliency, the cyber resiliency in place to recover if their CRM were to become unavailable, right? If that SaaS-based Intuit QuickBooks Online becomes unavailable, or if you have a controller who leaves in an unhappy manner and decides to, impact some of the data in that platform, you're giving them a simplified place where they can trust that that data is backed up and that you can recover it for them. And finally here, we're integrating with the core PSAs and on the alerting side of the house to make sure that you, as the MSP, the manager of that core IT function, has the ability to get those alerts and to continue billing as you always have. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you in your journey here. And again, go back. What if you're not having a conversation around things like onboarding, offboarding, and just core SaaS security? I think Jay would come out here and say you're missing another part of those $5.80, right? That core management. That's the other piece of the puzzle here. You've got to be having the broader conversation about your customer's environment. All right. So the pricing model that we've got in place, just to kind of keep us moving forward here, we've got a really simplified Microsoft 365 bundle. It's very price aggressive. Envision $1 per seat per month, unlimited storage, billed monthly. So again, we're setting the table for you to get into the platform at a very cost aggressive place. The second set of applications, they're simply sold on a per app basis. So really simple ways to engage in the platform and acquire the platform. All right, so
Okay.
now I'm going to take a breath here. And again, I've spilled a bunch of information out to you. We are going to wrap here, team, with a couple of questions. This is a little bit that conversation starter. And this is really, again, going back to Jay's vision for you as managed service providers. It's your opportunity to continue to grow at that double-digit rate, but you've got to take advantage of it and control it. So, again, a day in the life. These are all simple things that you can engage a customer in a conversation. The SaaS applications you're using in your daily routine. Do you even have a list? Again, if these things, if you can start here, you can bring either myself. I'm always happy to hop on a call with customers. You can bring myself. You can bring our selling team in, our product team in to help you engage and have these conversations. So don't hesitate to reach out and leverage us. The other thing I would call out is that, again, we talked about that discovery capability. Take time of some of the free tools that we're talking about here with Avix SaaS Management to go in and do a quick discovery of the SaaS applications that are in that environment. Get a real quick report around what the applications are that someone's using in their environment. It'll give you the chance to go have an active conversation with them about protecting the data that they're putting into those applications. Well, Janine, I think that's it for me. I'll let Janine wrap up.
If you would like to hang out, ask us more questions, we'll hang out for a few minutes. We want to thank Jay. I really appreciate all that great knowledge you dropped on us. And we'll see you on the road, Jay. You better believe it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jay. And for those of you that aren't aware, Jay, the Canalysjoined group dropped a good SaaS report. I think, Jay, you did that earlier today, right? So if you are not a participant in Jay's organization and the work that they're doing from an analyst perspective, take a minute and go check it out. Some great data out there.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
All right. I think I see a question here. Yep. And I see, David, thank you for that comment around the SMB space, right? We're already in place before COVID, the Microsoft 365s, some of the Ring 8, et cetera. Again, we just continue, as Jay mentioned about those millennials, a lot of the younger companies, say sub 5 years, are truly cloud first. And I'm constantly surprised at how little infrastructure, if any at all, they have. And just want to make sure that you're actively having that conversation with those customers about what are those business critical SaaS applications. The other point there would be, that's the thing about SaaS, is it's becoming a honeypot with regards to threat. Highly targeted. We've seen about a 300% increase. There's a couple of good reports that show that that's being, that's the new target for a number of threat actors out there.
Any parting thoughts, Stephen?
No, I'm just excited about for everyone here, kind of stepping into that journey, taking advantage of protecting some of those secondary applications, really engaging your customer in that conversation. And the last thing I'll say is, if you come across an application that we don't support, engage us in a conversation. We've got a number of partners that have said, "Hey, I'd like you to protect X or Y," and that's actually how Sage made it on our list of to-dos with regards to connectors that we'll provide data protection for. Is our partners brought that to us. And so again, we're looking for you, and we can partner with you to understand whether that's an application we can deliver data protection for or not. But again, appreciate everybody being here. And Janine, thank you so much for hosting us and bringing us out in front and getting Jay McBain here with us today.
I'll talk to you guys soon. I hope to see you guys on the road soon too. Have a great day.